In the early hours of Friday morning, the Philippines awoke to the fury of Typhoon Paolo, international name Matmo, a powerful tropical cyclone that made landfall in Dinapigue, Isabela at 9 a.m., unleashing destructive winds, torrential rains, and widespread disruption across northern Luzon. The Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services Administration, PAGASA, raised tropical cyclone wind signal number 4 over multiple provinces, signaling the highest level of alert for communities in the storm's direct path. Paolo packed maximum sustained winds of 130 kilometers per hour near the center, with gusts reaching up to 215 kilometers per hour. Its wind field extended 350 kilometers from the eye, affecting vast swaths of Luzon. As Paolo moved west-northwest at 25 kilometers per hour, it carved a path through the mountainous terrain of northern Luzon, slightly weakening but maintaining its typhoon status. The eye of the storm passed near San Guillermo, Isabela, before crossing into Ifugao and the Cordillera region. In Cagayan Valley, trees were uprooted, power lines snapped, and signages torn from their posts. The National Grid Corporation of the Philippines reported the shutdown of the Santiago-Alicia 69 kV transmission line, affecting thousands of residents in Isabela and Ifugao. Floodwaters surged in low-lying areas. In Barangay Bolboc, Batangas, streets turned into rivers as Paolo's outer bands dumped relentless rain. In Lemery, evacuation and clearing operations were underway as municipal rescue teams worked to relocate stranded families and pump out flood-prone zones. PAGASA warned of life-threatening storm surges reaching up to 3 meters in coastal provinces including Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur, La Union, Pangasinan, Zambales, Cagayan, Isabela, Aurora, and Quezon. The agency urged residents in vulnerable areas to evacuate immediately, citing a moderate to high risk of inundation within 24 hours. Sea travel was suspended across Luzon, stranding at least 48 passengers at various ports. Flights were canceled, and classes and government work were suspended in multiple provinces including Ifugao, Isabela, and parts of Aurora. By mid-morning, over 500 families, totaling more than 1,500 individuals, had evacuated in Isabela alone. The coastal town of Macanacan bore the brunt, with 342 families fleeing to safety. Emergency shelters were activated, and relief operations mobilized as local governments scrambled to respond. In Alicia, Isabela, residents reported hearing the roar of Paolo's winds hours before landfall. "It sounded like a freight train passing through our town," said Maritz de la Cruz, a local teacher. "We've seen storms before, but this one felt different, angrier, faster." The typhoon's passage over northern Luzon tested the resilience of infrastructure systems already strained by aging assets and limited redundancy. Roads in Ifugao and Mountain Province were rendered impassable due to landslides. Bridges in Quirino and Nueva Vizcaya were placed under close monitoring as river levels rose dangerously. In Metro Manila, although spared the eye of the storm, Paolo's periphery brought gale-force gusts and intermittent power outages. The capital's flood control systems were activated, with pumping stations operating at full capacity to prevent urban inundation. Satellite imagery from Zoom Earth showed Paolo's massive circulation spiraling over Luzon, with cloud bands stretching into the Visayas. The typhoon's structure was disrupted by land interaction, but remained intact enough to re-emerge over the West Philippine Sea by Friday evening. Forecast models indicated that Paolo would continue tracking west-northwestward, exiting the Philippine Area of Responsibility, PAR, by Saturday morning. Once over open water, re-intensification was likely due to warm sea surface temperatures and favorable upper-level wind patterns. However, Meteorologists cautioned that the degree of weakening over Luzon would influence Paolo's ability to reorganize. The system is large and fast-moving, said PAGASA forecaster Analyn Santos. Its outer bands continue to draw energy from surrounding waters, which could fuel its resurgence. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. convened the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, NDRRMC, early Friday to coordinate response efforts. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD, deployed food packs and hygiene kits to evacuation centers, while the Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH, dispatched clearing teams to affected roads. Local governments activated prepositioned assets, but logistical challenges remained. In remote areas of the Cordillera, communication lines were down, hampering coordination. We need satellite phones and drones to assess damage, said Mayor Liza Ramos of Cagayan Valley. Our people are isolated. Typhoon Paolo's impact reignited conversations about climate adaptation and infrastructure resilience. Experts pointed to the need for improved early warning systems, decentralized energy grids, and climate-proof housing in typhoon corridors. This is not just a weather event, it's a governance test, said Dr. Analyn Cruz, a climate scientist. We must invest in systems that anticipate, absorb, and adapt to shocks. Paolo is a reminder that nature doesn't wait for bureaucracy. In San Guillermo, volunteers braved floodwaters to rescue elderly neighbors. In Macanacan, evacuees sang hymns in shelters to calm frightened children. We may be battered, but we are not broken, said Father Ernesto, a parish priest leading relief prayers. Social media was flooded with images of destruction and solidarity. Hashtags like PaoloPH and Bangan Luzon trended nationwide as Filipinos rallied to support affected regions. Meanwhile, in Barangay Ipag, Marivals, floodwaters rose rapidly, catching many residents off guard. By noon, water levels had reached chest height in some areas, trapping families inside their homes. Rescue teams waded through murky waters to reach the elderly and children, many of whom had taken refuge on rooftops or second floors. We didn't expect it to rise this fast, said Analyn Cruz, a mother of 3. One moment we were watching the rain. The next we were lifting our children onto tables and praying the water wouldn't reach the ceiling. At least 38 families were evacuated from Marivals alone, according to local officials. Evacuation centers were quickly overwhelmed, prompting calls for additional tents, food packs, and medical supplies. The floods tested Batangas' infrastructure resilience. Roads connecting Marivals to Balanga were rendered impassable, with landslides reported along hilly sections. Power outages swept through several barangays as Paolo's winds toppled electric posts and damaged transformers. The Department of Public Works and Highways, DPWH, dispatched clearing teams, but progress was slow due to continuous rain and rising water levels. We're doing our best, but visibility is poor and the terrain is unstable, said engineer Ramon Villanueva, leading the response team. Drainage systems in urban centers like Lemery and Orion were overwhelmed, revealing long-standing vulnerabilities in flood control infrastructure. This is a wake-up call, said Bataan Governor Joe Garcia. We need to invest in climate resilient systems, not just patchwork solutions. Typhoon Paolo, which made landfall in Dinapigue, Isabela earlier that morning, maintained its strength as it crossed northern Luzon. Though Bataan was far from the storm's eye, its location along the western coast made it vulnerable to Paolo's expansive rain bands and storm-enhanced monsoon flow. PAGASA warned that rainfall could be heavier in mountainous areas, with runoff contributing to flash floods in low-lying zones. The combination of high tide and persistent rainfall created a perfect storm for coastal flooding in Bataan. Satellite imagery showed Paolo's spiral bands stretching across Luzon, with dense cloud clusters hovering over central Luzon. The typhoon circulation pulled moisture from the West Philippine Sea, intensifying rainfall over Bataan and neighboring provinces. The emotional toll was palpable. In flooded barangays, residents clung to soaked belongings, salvaging what they could. Children cried in evacuation centers, disoriented and cold. Volunteers distributed hot meals and blankets, but supplies were limited. "We've been through storms before, but this one feels different," said Father Ernesto of the Mariveles Parish. "There's a heaviness, not just in the skies, but in our hearts."
Doon sa kabilang